She didn't leave a love letter or a heartfelt confession. She left a list of bedroom regulations, complete with time slots, approved positions, and submission protocols. Love by schedule, passion on request, affection by rulebook. He read each line like a sentence passed on their marriage, where feelings had been replaced by paperwork. And all of it was dressed up as healthy boundaries and advice from a recently divorced friend, loudly projecting her own bitterness as a manual for action. But she miscalculated. "Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments." So, let's get started. When I came home that evening, an envelope was resting neatly on our bed. The paper was sharply creased, and across the top, in my wife's graceful script, it read, "Bedroom Guidelines." I stood there for a moment, puzzled, unsure whether this was some kind of prank or an unusual setup for a new kind of intimacy. But as I unfolded the sheet, my confusion gave way to disbelief. "Effective immediately." Those were the first words, bolded and impossible to miss. Below, a numbered list detailed 15 directives that now governed every aspect of our physical connection. The very first item? Our intimate time was now limited strictly to Tuesdays and Saturdays, between 9 and 10:30 p.m. The second rule required that any romantic initiation be preceded by a written notice, submitted at least 3 hours beforehand. The third point allowed for only 3 specific sexual positions, outlined in a supplementary chart. The list went on, regulating everything from mandatory grooming protocols to time limits, even stipulating which pet names I was still allowed to use. After 5 years of marriage, I apparently now needed bureaucratic approval to touch my own wife. I sat at the edge of the bed, rereading the surreal commandments, struggling to comprehend what I was looking at. Rule 11 stood out in its absurdity. All performance will be subject to weekly evaluations via standardized feedback forms. This was coming from the same woman who used to pull me into dark corners at family weddings, laughing breathlessly like we were teenagers again. I heard her car pull into the driveway. Instead of confronting her then and there, I folded the document and tucked it into my pocket. Over dinner, I felt her watching me, clearly anticipating a reaction. I deliberately kept things mundane, talking about my meetings, asking about her day, ignoring the tension thickening between us. She fidgeted with her wine glass, tapping her fingers in a subtle but persistent beat. Finally, after half an hour of strained small talk, she broke the silence. "Did you read what I left for you?" she asked. "You mean the rule book?" I answered. Her expression tightened. She didn't appreciate the sarcasm. "They're not rules," she said quietly. "They're boundaries." This wasn't her first attempt to assert control. Just last month, she'd gone through my closet and discarded half my clothes, saying they didn't reflect who I am anymore. 2 weeks earlier, she'd installed a tracking app on my phone, insisting it was for safety. I'd pushed back each time, calmly, respectfully, but with firm resistance. But this was different. This crossed a threshold. "Where is this coming from?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice measured. This isn't how married people operate. She straightened in her chair, regaining her composure. "Celeste told me that clear boundaries are key to a healthy marriage," she said. Of course, Celeste, her recently divorced friend who'd been planting toxic seeds in our lives ever since her own split. The same Celeste who claimed her biggest regret was ever giving her ex too much freedom. My wife's tone turned mechanical, like she was reciting something she'd rehearsed. "I've thought a lot about us. These rules will help create clarity and increase satisfaction for both of us." Clarity? Metrics? She was framing our marriage like a corporate restructuring plan. This wasn't the woman I married. These weren't her thoughts. They were someone else's words wearing her voice. I didn't say anything else, just nodded faintly and resumed eating. She hadn't anticipated that. No argument, no outburst, just silence. Later that night, when she tried to reopen the topic, I told her I needed space and chose to sleep in the guest room. I left the house early the next morning, careful not to wake her. Throughout the day, her messages became increasingly urgent, asking what I thought of the new structure. I replied that we'd discuss it that evening. All day, I considered not just how to respond to her document, but what it had laid bare. This wasn't just about a list. It was a symptom of something much larger. A slow drift, that had been reshaping our marriage under the surface. The rules hadn't caused the fracture, they merely illuminated it. She didn't realize it, but what she'd handed me forced me to confront a truth I'd been dodging for a long time. Things between us had changed, and not for the better. The woman I once fell in love with was full of laughter and spontaneity. She valued mutual understanding and freedom. Now, she was managing our closeness like it was an employee handbook. By the time I started the car that evening, I had made my decision. What I planned to say would be clear and unambiguous, something that could either guide us back to what we once had or draw a final line in the sand. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to live under a system where love required scheduling, consent forms, and performance metrics. It was time to either rebuild the trust and respect we'd lost or walk away from whatever this had become. Looking back, the signs had been there. Her need for control hadn't arrived all at once. It crept in gradually, like ivy scaling a brick wall, innocent at first glance, until one day you see it's overtaken the entire structure. In the early days of our marriage, everything felt balanced. We shared the weight of decisions, never kept score, and our connection was effortless. But around 2 years ago, I noticed a shift. Small remarks began to feel like subtle critiques: my wardrobe, my friends, how I spent my downtime. I remember the first real warning sign. I'd planned a weekend fishing trip with my old college buddies, a tradition I'd kept for years. Just 3 days before I was set to leave, she suddenly remembered that she'd scheduled a work dinner that weekend and needed me by her side. When I reminded her of my plans, she didn't object directly. Instead, she got teary, said she felt overlooked, and worried how showing up alone might affect her image at work. Wanting to be supportive, I canceled the trip. She was so thankful, warm, loving, appreciative. At the time, I felt good about my choice. I didn't realize I'd just taught her how easy it was to redirect my boundaries. After that, the pattern only deepened. And now, we'd arrived at this: performance reviews and intimacy on an appointment basis. She asked me to shift my workout schedule, saying that evenings alone made her uneasy. Then she began questioning why I needed to go out for drinks after work. Couldn't that time be better spent with her? Subtly, she started altering the pantry, swapping out my usual snacks for things she considered healthier. Each individual change felt minor. And each concession I made was met with fleeting warmth and occasional praise. But her expectations kept changing. Her approval became something I had to earn. Her affection grew scarce. Even our physical connection started to follow a similar trajectory. What started as gentle suggestions, "I like it when you," gradually turned into quiet criticisms. "Do you really have to?" And soon, those suggestions turned into strict, non-negotiable directives. "We're only going to do it this way from now on," she'd say. And every time I adjusted, her expectations became firmer. By 6 months ago, all spontaneity had vanished. Physical intimacy had become a rehearsed act, bound to her conditions, and any deviation was met with visible annoyance, disinterest, or an icy silence. What should have been shared, intimate moments instead became emotionally tense performances under her watchful eye. The night before she formally presented what I came to call the rules, another telling moment occurred. I leaned in to kiss her shoulder while she was reading in bed, a small, quiet act of affection. She recoiled like I'd violated some invisible boundary. "I can't just switch into that mode on command," she snapped. "There's a time and a place." "This isn't it." I gently asked when the right moment might be. She answered coldly, "I'll let you know." Her tone made it clear. Intimacy was now something she rationed, doled out when it suited her, wielded as leverage. I lay awake that night, unsettled, and yet I still wasn't prepared for what would follow. Looking back, the list she gave me wasn't some dramatic shift. It was simply a written version of the rules she had already been enforcing, unspoken until then. What shook me wasn't how unreasonable the rules were, though they were absurd, but what they symbolized: a total breakdown of mutual respect. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was someone expected to obey, unquestioningly. That night, after a strained dinner, I retreated to my office while she stayed glued to the TV in the living room. I opened my laptop, trying to make sense of the changes I'd been sensing. What I found confirmed what I'd feared. Her browser was filled with titles like "Mastering Marital Power" and "How to Train Your Husband." Worse still was a forum she'd joined where women openly traded strategies for dominating their partners. My stomach turned as I read the threads she'd liked, posts about stripping men of independence and asserting control in the bedroom. This wasn't the person I'd married. She had been slowly pulled into a mindset that viewed our relationship not as a shared journey, but as a power struggle. And now I stood at a turning point, continue down this road and lose myself, or take a stand, either to try to rebuild what we once had, or to walk away with some dignity left. That night, I chose the guest room again, telling her I needed time to process the new agreement. My calmness unsettled her. She'd probably anticipated a fight or immediate surrender. Instead, my measured reaction threw her off. It gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, Saturday, I left early, saying I needed space to think. In reality, I had a plan. To face this properly, I had to understand what had brought her to this point. I met Raymond, a mutual friend, at a coffee shop across town. His wife had once been close with mine, before Celeste came into the picture. That friendship had faded as Celeste's influence grew. When I explained everything, Raymond shook his head. "She's changed," he said. "My wife tried reaching out last month after your wife made some strange comment about training you right." He told me Celeste had hijacked the conversation, claiming women needed to take back authority in their marriages. That confirmed what I'd feared. This wasn't just about bedroom control. My wife had adopted a worldview where marriage was a battlefield. Celeste's divorce really messed her up, Raymond added. She thinks it ended because she gave her ex too much freedom. Now she's out to make sure no woman repeats her mistake. Suddenly, the obsessive control made more sense. My wife wasn't making arbitrary demands. She was following a philosophy passed down by someone else's bitterness. Ironically, in trying to prevent her own relationship from falling apart, she was driving it toward that exact fate. As I drove home, I felt more clarity than I had in weeks. I knew now that a simple confrontation would only lead to defensiveness. Trying to bargain would imply her rules had legitimacy. Quiet compliance would break me. No, I needed a new strategy, one that went to the heart of the issue, the loss of balance and mutual respect. When I returned, she was in the kitchen, preparing lunch with stiff, deliberate movements. She'd texted me 3 times while I was out, each message more insistent about finalizing our arrangement. The moment I walked in, she said, "We need to go over the rules." "We will," I replied. "But first I'd like to take you out for dinner tonight, somewhere nice." She looked surprised, then curious. "So, you're ready to talk terms?" "I'm ready," I said, voice steady and calm, to have a real conversation about our marriage. I could feel the tension pressing in on both of us, and it was clear we needed a release. "How about a massage today?" I offered softly. My treat. The suggestion seemed to disarm her. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, loosening the guarded expression she'd been wearing. She agreed, perhaps assuming this was my way of surrendering. Once she left for her appointment, I sat down, not to stew or spiral, but to think, deliberately and without resentment, about what I truly wanted from this relationship. I spent hours surrounded by our wedding memories, flipping through photo albums, reading anniversary cards, reliving the moments that had once defined our bond. I wasn't ready to abandon 5 years of shared history, but I couldn't keep compromising my sense of self for something that now felt alien. That night, I reserved a table at the same upscale restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. I dressed with care, drove us there in silence, and asked for a private corner booth, far from the crowd. As we sat down, she pulled out a slim journal and placed it on the table. She was clearly prepared to take notes, maybe even expecting a back-and-forth negotiation on the list of rules she'd handed me. But seeing that notebook only sharpened my thoughts. "Before we get into specifics," I said evenly, "there's something I need to understand first. What exactly do you believe these rules are supposed to accomplish for us?" She didn't flinch. She'd obviously anticipated the question. "Structure. Clarity," she answered without hesitation. "When people don't know what's expected of them, relationships fall apart. I'm trying to set boundaries we can both live by." "I understand," I said with a nod. "But were you planning to follow these same rules too?" That made her pause. The self-assurance in her face flickered. "These were designed to address issues on your end," she said, a little less confidently now. "So they're not about mutual responsibility," I replied. They're about controlling me. Her features tightened. They're about protecting healthy limits, she snapped. No, I said, my voice steady. Boundaries are something a couple agrees on together. What you did was create a list of unilateral demands without my input. I saw the storm starting to form behind her eyes. She hadn't expected me to challenge the basis of the rules themselves. Are you agreeing to them or not? She asked, clearly growing impatient. I brought my answer, I said, reaching inside my jacket. But before I give it to you, I want to remind you of something. The woman I married believed in equality, partnership, trust, and shared values. I'm still hoping that woman is somewhere in there. I laid a sealed envelope in front of her. She glanced at it, then back at me, and for the first time that evening, her confidence faltered. Go ahead, I told her. Inside wasn't a revised list of her terms, nor was it a counteroffer. It was a draft divorce agreement. Not yet filed, but fully filled out. It spoke for itself. Her face went pale as she scanned the document. What is this? She asked, though she already knew. My answer, I said calmly. You gave me 15 conditions that would change the core of our marriage. I'm offering you a single, final choice in return. She looked from the paper to me, disbelief carved into her face. You're ending this marriage because I tried to establish boundaries? No, I said gently. I'm showing you what happens when a partnership is turned into a dictatorship. You didn't give me rules, I added. You gave me an ultimatum. You took away the equality we once had, even over the most intimate parts of our lives. Her hands trembled slightly. I thought we'd talk through them, adjust a few if needed. And by doing that, I replied, I would have accepted the idea that you had the right to make those demands in the first place. I don't accept that. The server arrived just then, placing our meals in front of us with a strained smile. Neither of us moved to eat. This is overkill, she said, voice rising. Every couple has expectations. They do, I agreed. But in healthy relationships, those expectations are formed together, through mutual understanding. You wrote a contract and expected me to obey it, like I was beneath you. I paused to sip my water. Let me ask, where did those rules even come from? She looked down, the silence telling me more than words could. Celeste gave me some input, she finally admitted. The rest I came up with. And the books? I pressed. The ones about controlling men and breaking male autonomy? Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected me to know. You went through my browser history? She asked. The same way you've gone through my phone, my emails, even my clothes, I said, staying composed. The difference is, I was trying to understand how the woman I married became someone I can barely recognize. She looked back down at the divorce papers, the full weight of the moment finally landing. You're really going through with this, she said softly. After everything we've been through, 5 years, over a list. I looked at her directly. That's exactly the question I've been asking myself about you. Is controlling my life really worth destroying our marriage over? My tone remained even, but the gravity of my words couldn't be ignored. Because that's exactly what this list stands for. It's a glaring symbol of how far we've strayed from mutual respect and balance. I leaned in, just a bit. The woman I once vowed to stand beside had once believed in partnership. We used to make decisions together. We used to cherish each other's independence. What we had wasn't governed by rules or checkboxes. It was born from desire and deep connection. For a brief second, something shifted in her expression, a crack in the confident front she'd been wearing. I glimpsed the woman I married, vulnerable, uncertain, searching my face for a way back. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice fragile, almost lost in the space between us. I want my wife, I said without hesitation. Not this person who sees our relationship as a battleground for control. I want the woman who believed in us as equals, not someone who needs to monitor every move I make just to feel safe. I motioned toward the divorce documents resting on the table between us. They're unsigned. What happens next is your call. But let me be clear. I won't live under a dictatorship. I won't be inspected, timed, or regulated in my own marriage. We rebuild this on mutual respect, or we walk away. Her gaze dropped to the papers like they were something dangerous, unfamiliar. When she looked up again, her eyes shimmered with restrained tears. I don't want to end this, she said softly. Then choose, I responded. firm yet not unkind. You can have a husband who stands beside you, or you can have control. You can't have both. I extended my hand, not touching her, but offering a truth she couldn't ignore. This moment defines everything after. Choose wisely. Around us, the restaurant buzzed on. Laughter, silverware clinking, distant conversations, all oblivious to the quiet, seismic shift at our table. She stared at my outstretched hand, then down at the documents again. I watched the weight of the moment press down on her. Finally, the tears began to spill, silent, steady. She didn't brush them away, didn't move, just stared, as if hoping the papers would vanish on their own. Then, slowly, she reached out. Piece by piece, she tore the document into bits too small to ever piece back together. "I don't want this," she choked out. "I don't want to lose you." My chest tightened, but I kept my composure. "Ripping those up means nothing if everything else stays the same," I said softly. "I can print another set if I have to." She pushed the scraps aside and gently reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't realize what I was doing to us." "I think you did," I said, quiet but firm. "These weren't accidents. They were choices. What I need to know is why. What changed to make you think control was the only way to save this marriage?" She let go, turning her face away, her features twisted by guilt and grief. The restaurant carried on, glasses clinking, voices rising and falling in rhythm, its normalcy clashing with the fracture and repair taking place at our table. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "It started with Celeste," she said, almost like a confession. "After her divorce, she kept insisting it happened because she gave her husband too much freedom. She said men only stay when they're kept in line." "You believed her?" I asked, stunned. "After everything we've built over the last 5 years?" "Not at first," she admitted, "but she was so certain, like she'd discovered something I hadn't. She brought me into her support group, these women all saying the same thing, that taking control is what saved their relationships." "But Celeste's marriage didn't survive," I reminded her. "She got divorced." "She says that's because she waited too long to act." She stared down at her untouched food. "I know how it sounds now, but when you're surrounded by voices repeating the same thing over and over, it starts to feel like truth." I studied her closely, trying to find traces of the woman I used to know. "What about the online forums? Those books telling women to strip their partners of autonomy?" Her cheeks colored with shame. "Celeste's group pushed those. They believe modern marriages fail because women have surrendered their natural authority. And they think reclaiming control, especially sexually, is the solution." She gave a faint nod. "The leader says physical dominance is the gateway. Once a man accepts that, everything else falls into place." "So it wasn't about closeness," I said slowly. "It was about power." She nodded again, just barely. "They said once that part is won, the rest becomes easy." It hit me like a blow to the chest. So I was being trained, conditioned. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "Hearing you say it like that—" "There's no softer version of it," I interrupted, more sharply than I meant. I paused, breathed in, tried to soften my tone. "This wasn't some slip-up. You deliberately tried to reshape me, strip away my agency, mold me into something I'm not." She buried her face in her hands, her whole body trembling. "I was scared," she said through her fingers. "Celeste and the others, they kept warning me. Said if I didn't take charge, I'd be alone. That men always leave unless they're controlled." "And what evidence did they ever give you to prove that?" I asked. I posed the question plainly. Aside from their own fractured romances, what real proof did they have? She responded, a hint of defensiveness in her voice, referencing weekly testimonials. She spoke of women who credited these methods with saving their marriages. "Did you ever actually speak to any of them? Or talk to their husbands?" She gave a small shake of her head. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You were prepared to throw away everything we'd built together because of vague online advice and the perspective of a divorced friend who's still healing?" Her arms dropped, mascara starting to run as tears welled in her eyes. "It sounds terrible when you put it that way." "That's because it is terrible," I said. "It's not just irrational, it's painful. You didn't trust us enough, didn't trust me enough, to tune all that noise out," I said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I made a mistake. She reached out, this time with hope that I wouldn't recoil. I let fear dictate my actions. I listened to voices I shouldn't have, but that's not who I am. You know that, don't you? She hesitated before continuing. The woman you married wouldn't have done what I did. I studied her expression, trying to discern whether this was true remorse or another layer of manipulation in a situation that had been slowly unraveling. The real question hung silently between us. Was that woman still there? Or had she become someone who viewed me as an obstacle to manage rather than a partner to honor? Still holding my hand, she said softly, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still me. Please, tell me what I can do to make things right. I gently pulled my hand away. That depends on what you mean by making it right. If you're just looking to do the bare minimum to avoid losing me while keeping the same games alive underneath, then there's no point continuing this. She shook her head quickly. That's not it. That's not what I want. I want us back, the real version of us. Then we've got work to do, I said. And we start with your list. Dinner sat untouched. We paid the bill in silence and drove home without a word, both lost in our thoughts. Once inside, she went straight to the bedroom and came back clutching a sheet of paper, her infamous list of rules. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out toward me. What do you want me to do with this? She asked, standing hesitantly in the middle of the living room. That's not my decision, I told her. Not mine, not Celeste's, not the internet's. What do you think this marriage needs? She looked at the paper, then back at me. And without flinching, she began to tear it up. This time, not in a rush of emotion like she had with the divorce forms, but with calm determination. When she finished, she let the torn pieces fall into the fireplace. I want it gone, she said. I want to destroy it. I passed her the box of matches from the mantel. She struck one, dropped it in, and we both watched as flames devoured the last remnants of her attempt to control what we shared. This is a start, I said, as the last corner of paper blackened and curled. But burning paper is simple. Rebuilding trust takes real effort. She sat down beside me, leaving a small but deliberate space between us. I'll do whatever it takes, she said. Then I need absolute honesty, I told her. How far did this go? What other areas of our life were shaped by this mindset? She spent the next 3 hours confessing. Things I hadn't even noticed came to light, minor manipulations, subtle decisions made behind my back. She'd quietly deleted messages from women on my social accounts. She'd deliberately shrunk my clothes in the wash. She even faked a call from a clinic once, just to keep me from traveling for work. Each revelation stung, but I stayed steady. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about truth, and truth was the only way forward. What about Celeste, and the group you were part of? I asked after her last admission. I've already cut them off, she said. I deleted my profile while you were in the restroom at the restaurant. Hearing myself admit all this out loud, it made me sick. How do I know this isn't just another strategy? Another play to win back control before sliding back into old habits? She flinched, but held my gaze. You don't, she said quietly. Not right now. I understand that. But I'm hoping that over time, what I do will matter more than what I say. She hesitated, then added, I've also scheduled therapy. For myself. Not for us. Not yet. I need to understand why I turned my back on everything we stood for. That caught me off guard. It was the first time it felt like she was going beyond surface-level damage control. That's a real step, I said. But I need to be honest with you too. I'm not staying here tonight. Maybe not for a few nights. I need time to process all of this. Her face fell. Are you leaving me? No, I said softly. I'm stepping away to think. There's a difference. I rose and walked toward the bedroom to pack a few essentials. She followed but didn't cross the threshold, lingering in the doorway while I gathered my things. When will you come back? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. When I'm ready, I said. And when I do, we'll sit down, together, and talk about new boundaries. Mutual respect, not control, became the new foundation. Just as I was about to leave, I stopped, turned around, and looked at her. One last thing, I said. I need full access to your phone and all your accounts. The same transparency you expected from me. This wasn't a power move. It was about starting over with trust. She didn't hesitate. She handed me her phone, already unlocked. No passwords were concealed, no more secrets waiting in the shadows. The days that followed marked a careful, intentional reset. I spent a few nights in a hotel, needing time alone to sort through my thoughts and figure out what I truly wanted. When I finally returned, we began the slow and steady process of rebuilding, this time with honesty and mutual dignity at the core. She began seeing a therapist twice a week. She ended her relationship with Celeste, even as Celeste tried to manipulate her way back into her life. The most important change, though, was in her. She started to resemble the person I had once fallen in love with again, someone who listened, who cared, and who saw me as her equal, not someone to control or manage. 6 months on, our marriage feels more solid than it has in years. The closeness that had once been smothered under a web of control and rigid boundaries returned. Only now it came from a place of openness, real communication, and mutual desire. Today, we make decisions as a team. We respect each other's space but choose every day to build a life together. Just last week, she handed me an envelope. It was the same size and shape as the one that used to hold her infamous list of rules, but this time it held something very different. There were no demands, no restrictions. Just handwritten notes filled with gratitude, reflections on the support I'd given her, and sincere apologies for forgetting what our partnership was meant to be. At the very end, she'd written one final message. Your calm response changed everything. You didn't fight back with more control. You didn't walk away. Instead, you gave me a real choice, and in doing so, you made me see the harm I was causing. Thank you for holding on to us when I had let go of what we were worth. Sometimes, the strongest answer to someone trying to control you isn't to yell or to give in. It's standing in quiet confidence, knowing your worth, and refusing to accept anything less than the respect you deserve. That night, her notorious list of bedroom rules wasn't just thrown away. It was replaced by something far more meaningful, a heartfelt vow to protect the equality and shared respect that make love worth holding on to. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.